I'm really proud of the fact that I'm a former Texas high school football coach, teacher, taught elementary PE many, many years ago, Willis. You got a ton of respect for all the high school coaches in the state. I think it's the most disciplined state by far in structure. I've recruited all over the nation, and what Joe and Glenn have done with the association is just mind-blogging. They've just done a sensational job. So excited to be here.
Willie, where are you on the movers and packing and getting into the new facility?
We're moving in a week from Friday, but we're going to move our stuff in and we have to get out of there. They won't let us stay.
Is everything on?
Everything's on pace. It's exactly right. They just want to make sure that we're not in there when they're doing their last minute adjustments with everything. But it's going to be unbelievable. $160 million, 160,000 square feet. It's going to house everything with football. We'll have as good a facility as anybody in the nation. It'll be outstanding.
Yeah, you've taken over programs to kind of raise their level, but it's a new world. Transfer portal, coaching turnover.
Yeah.
Like, how do you kind of feel year two new coordinators, so many new faces? Does it feel kind of a year one, and how do you go about stacking?
It really doesn't feel like a year one because I've been there for a little period of time. You and I have talked about it. I got in there a little bit late, played a championship game at my previous institution. And the dates were a little bit different with what was going on with the transfer portal. But I really like, our recruiting this last year. We're making a concerted effort to recruit the heck out of the state of Texas, sign a bunch of quality high school kids. We're going to, help our roster out with, supplementing it with guys from the portal. We did have to get some new coaches, but we had, January, February, March, April, May, June, July to kind of get those guys acclimated to how I like to do things. And the NCAA is allowing you to do more things on the football side. If you could have a football out there for a couple hours a week when you're not in spring football, so we take advantage of that. Just can't do anything competitive. You can't do offense versus defense or wide receivers versus defensive back. So we really feel like we've taken a big step forward. The big thing that I stressed at Media Day a couple of weeks ago is I think we've got legitimate competition at positions, and we didn't have that at a lot of spots last year.
Sean J. Rogers from CBS Sports. Coach, obviously you guys in recruiting have done, have hit some really high-powered guys from the state of Texas. And I'm curious, in this era of rev share and money, like how much does it matter still to have relationships and to have Texas ties, I guess?
It's huge. I think it's really big. There's a bunch of my coaches on staff who have coached high school football in the state of Texas and have been around the state for a long period of time. I know a lot of people from my time at, coaching high school and Blinn Junior College and Sam Houston State University. And then also we recruited over here quite a bit at my previous institution as well. So I think it's still all about relationships. And the other thing I like is, the high school coaches here in the state run their program like a college program. So they know what we're looking for when you go in there and talk to them. And be a great recruiter. You got to be a talent evaluator and you got to be an information gatherer. And it's much simpler gathering information from the high school coaches here than any place I've ever been.
Highway Kurt Bowles from Houston Chronicle.
Yeah.
Speaking of recruiting and high school, are more high school kids getting overlooked, maybe the marginal kids because of the transfer portal? And I'm curious, in your experience, how many high school kids now are saying, well, what do you pay me if I come to Houston?
Well, I heard a couple of years ago, not this past year, but the year before, something like 20% down. I don't know if that's true or not, but there are less high school kids that are signing at Power 4 level. And, that's part of the conversation that you're having now is, part of it is financial. It's a new world for everybody, but that's part of it. So, you bring the guys in. Recruiting is so accelerated than it was when I began recruiting many years ago. You used to have the kids take official visits in January, and then had the first signing date was the only signing date was the first Wednesday in February. It's not the case any longer. And then you started having them come in December, and now they're coming in late May and June, for their visits. So I would say most Power 4 programs, probably the ones in particular in the state of Texas, are probably about 80, 90% done right now with commitments and all those kind of things. So, yeah, that is. But to answer your second question, the money is talked about. Sometimes it's quick. Sometimes it's every once in a while I'll get in the room and I'll tell them I'm going to talk about what I know you came here to talk about, academics. They'll kind of look at me, and but I still stress it. I guess I'm old school. I think it's at the end of the day, you want to be someplace where you're going to help. A young man wants to go somewhere where you develop them from 18 to 22 years of age. And I was my brother had his 50th class reunion in Buffalo, New York this past weekend, and Dorian Williams plays for the Buffalo Bills. He played for me at Tulane, and great player for the Bills. He and I hooked up and talked for a few hours while I was there. That was a big part of the conversation. I want our guys to have the same experience at Houston that Dorian had when he was at Tulane. He's got a lifelong. I said, who do you still talk to? Man, he rambled off 20-some guys, because he was there for 4 years with me. And he's got his best friends are the guys he went to college with. So I still think you can do that in this day and age. You can build those lifelong relationships, and that's what we're going to do at the University of Houston.
Willie, in a couple of days, we're going to get to talk to some of your guys back home just before the season. I'm curious, I wanted to ask about Tanner Koziel. Was there any backstory or how he sort of got on your radar there, and were you actively looking for a tight end, or did he just happen to, get there at the right time?
Yeah, we were looking for one, and we brought him in, after the first portal, and came down to us and at the school he ended up going to, and and we had really good relationships with him, and he got back in the portal and contacted us, and we brought him down, and he really wanted to come to the University of Houston. So we were very fortunate to get him. I think he's going to be an outstanding player for us in the Big 12. He's 6'6", 6'7", 250, fantastic movement. I think he had the most contested catches in Division I football his last year at Ball State, something like 28, 29. So yeah, we're pumped about Tanner and what he's going to do for us.
With revenue share here and just the kind of the soft cap, how confident are you that teams stay within that cap? How do y'all go about figuring out how to use it, where to allocate those funds?
Well, right now it's the rules. From what I understand, you have to do that after July 1st hit. So everybody's supposed to be following the rules. We'll see what happens, right? But how we do it is like anybody. There's I've got a lot of friends that some of whom I coached or coached with who are in the NFL, and I got a lot of my information from them as far as how to structure a roster, and because there are a lot of similarities between it. They've been doing it for 100 years. So you talk about the quarterback and the cover corner and the left tackle and the rush end, and different positions that you put a premium on, and so yeah, we're I tell our guys all the time when the season ends, the more you play, the better you play, the more opportunities you have with outside NIL, and also with gaining money from the rev share the next year that you count. If you play just a couple more snaps than I do, it's probably not going to happen. So it's what you look at. We love them all, but when you make that decision, it's based on performance.
Coach, just to follow up a little bit on the question I asked earlier, I mean, people, like you say, talk about relationships all the time in recruiting, and I'm curious, in the rev share era, like, what do relationships actually kind of do for you? Like, what are the mechanics of how relationships help you?
Well, I walk through the lobby here and I probably, hugged about, I don't know, 10 of my former players. So I got a bunch of guys that are high school coaches all over the state. So relationships are very, very important. One of my, Tim Flanders, a great player for me, Sam Houston got married a couple weeks ago and I was at the wedding and there's a ton of former players there. So I think it's very, very important. And you got to, when it comes down to you and another school and a lot of things are equal, I think that's going to help you out. And how we develop relationships at our place is we're involved in our guys' lives on a daily basis. I think from 18 to 22 years of age, you do a great job, you're cooking with grease and you're going to have a successful life. You screw up between 18 and 22, you're going to have some issues and problems. So we're around all the time. I'm not I said this the other day, nobody knew what I was talking about. I don't get up in a tower and coach from up there, A lot of my young coaches don't know what the heck I'm talking about, but there's been some great coaches who got up in that tower and coach, but we're around them every single day and not just on the field. We're fortunate. We've got a training table and we try to eat with different guys every day. I tell my coaches, you know each other. I don't need you guys to sit at a table shooting the bull. I don't need to sit at a table with them shooting the bull. I need to, go around and sit with the kids. So, building a relationship, it takes a long time. It really does. So we work on it on a daily basis.
Coach Colin Kennedy, 24/7 Sports. Wanted to ask you about something you brought up earlier, player identification and evaluation from your time at Tulane, now at Houston. You, Wes, and the group have been considered some of the best in that space. What about your process, if anything, has changed over the years, whether it's high school recruiting or the portal? And also, in some ways, what hasn't changed to allow you guys to maintain that advantage?
You got to adapt to the place you're at. When I was at head coach at Belen, 100% of my guys were from Texas. I moved up to Central Missouri. I tried to do that one year, and a lot of guys weren't happy because they were far from home. So I understood that at that point in time, you got to recruit local. So I've done that every place that I've been. And the great thing about the University of Houston is I've never been on a plane to recruit. I just get in the car and I drive to different places that I'm going to be recruiting. We're fortunate. I talk all the time. We're the epicenter of football in the world. Houston, Texas. We're in the unbelievable great state of Texas. And I recruit next door to the state of Louisiana as well because I've got ties from being at Tulane for 8 years. So, you got to do a good job of talent evaluation. And it's different now. Tulane had a different, things you had to look at than the University of Houston or San Houston State or whatever. It's got to fit your university and institution and your location. So I think we do a good, excellent job of identifying and then gathering that information, talking to the high school coach. One of the reasons why I admire high school coaches so much, they have to take the guys that are walking the hallway. Right? We get to pick our guys. Same thing in the NFL. We get to pick our guys. So I tell my coaches all the time, you bring in a problem, that's on you. We got to do a good job of understanding that maybe this guy's not going to fit in our culture at the University of Houston. So gathering that information, not just from the head coach, assistant coaches, counselors. I've been around for a long time, and I probably know somebody that was at that school at some point in time, or maybe their kids are playing. Right now I got my fourth father-son combo playing for me at the University of Houston right now. So, we just really try to dig into it and find out if they're going to, be a fit at our place.
Willie, earlier, Eric Morse was up there talking about having spreadsheets in Excel and sort of going through the roster and how they manage rev share. What's it been like for you and your roster in terms of those decisions that have to be made about, who gets what with the whatever amount of percentage you have of the rev share?
You want to be fair. I'm glad I'm entering my second year because, you want to reward the kids that are in your program, first and foremost. And I wasn't really able to do that last year because we had a lot of holes to fill like came in later and some kids were gone and things like that. I didn't even get a chance to meet a lot of them. So, you want to definitely help out the guys that are showing it in the Big 12, that are successful and can play for you in the Big 12. So we've only got a couple of us that sit and talk. My coaches have no idea what anybody's getting. It's me and two other guys. And, we talk about it and we manage it and make sure we stay under the cap. I was talking to Dorian Williams. I told him, you're still playing. You'd be making a lot of money. I was talking to Tim Flanders about that at Sam Houston State. You didn't have to do this stuff, years ago, but now you do, and you just got to make sure you're as fair as you possibly can. And then you also got to do a good job positionally. You got to find out, you got X number of guys playing wide out, tight end, tight quarterback, et cetera. And, probably a few years ago, you might have had 6 guys on scholarship at quarterback, and now you might only have 4 because of the financial situation. Then you got to practice smart. You got to make sure you don't have quite as many guys on the squad as what you had in the past also.
We heard a term that we didn't think we'd ever hear, dead money. Is that something where you have to be careful about guys that maybe, whether it's freshmen or maybe somebody who's not contributing as much?
No, you're exactly right. You bring a guy in and he doesn't play for you. That money is used for development of a student athlete, and you got to understand that when you're recruiting an incoming freshman. So that's very important. And, it's not going to change. It's going to be more difficult for an incoming freshman to come in and start and make a huge impact his first year. You get a guy who can do that. He's a really, really special player. So you got to understand when you're looking at all this, when you're, figuring out your roster and how you're giving out money. Hey, this guy's a freshman, and it might take him a couple of years to show us exactly what he can do.
Greg Lucas, San Antonio Express News. Coach, you've talked a lot about the rev share and managing it, but overall, do you see this as a positive development for the sport? Are you in a better place this year?
Yeah, I think it is. I think everybody's interested in it right now. And I'd have been, last year or 2 years ago, I'd have been talking about my squad and talking about the portal and rev share and all that stuff that we're talking about right now. I just think what needs to, the number one thing that needs to happen is we got to go down to one portal. That has got to happen. And hopefully that's going to happen this year. It's just, and I think it'll be great for the universities. And I think it'll be really good for the student athletes. When I talk to kids and I recruit them from the high school level, I said, hey, this is a 4-year decision. If you're wanting to come here and you have a little bit of adversity and you want to book and go someplace else, don't come here. I don't need that. I want to develop you. I want you to fight through adversity like you have to do in the real world. And most of the kids and parents really understand that because I want it to be a 4-year decision. I did not want it to be a 1-year decision. I want to have some stability in our roster year after year after year. Yeah, you're going to supplement it with the portal, but I'd rather supplement it with incoming freshmen from the great state of Texas.